Welcome to Behind the Pint with Spicy, a chance where I get to sit down with some of the friends that I've made over the years, either playing role play or just people I've come to know in general. And as I've moved on in my life and gotten to know these individuals, everybody has a story to tell, from the best to the worst, and that's what I want to bring you today. So I'm sitting down with some friends. We call it Behind the Pint because I'm usually drinking a beer. Today I've got a Coors Light. I just needed something. My tummy wasn't doing so good. But I'd like to welcome a very good friend of mine. I've known him for, about 2 years now, coming up on that. Josh.
Yep.
Josh, welcome
About
to
that
Behind
time.
the Pint, buddy.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm looking forward to this discussion. This is interesting. First time I've been on camera like this and done an interview in this kind of fashion, so I'm excited.
Yeah, man. We don't usually publish the camera stuff, but it's nice to see your face. I've only ever seen you in character or heard your voice.
Hey, likewise. Likewise. It was good to see you. You know, it felt like as soon as I saw you, it felt like I knew you for a long time. So that's
Kidding,
great.
man. So let's talk, man. We met in a role-playing server where we kind of do our own thing, but as I got to know you over the years and we've worked on other projects together, I realized that there was a man behind the screen. So let's talk about Josh today. How old are you, Josh?
Well, 39. I
39.
round up. Yeah, July. I don't want to get too deep into my good
No,
details,
no,
but
no, 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 no. Uh, Let me ask you though, where'd you grow up?
I grew up on the East Coast of the United States. I was born in Florida, but if you want to go as high up to like Virginia, North Carolina, that's where I spent a lot of time as well.
So you roam the coast. Nice. Mom and dad, parents, still with us?
Yeah, they are actually to this day. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be able to say that. I can't stress how much of a blessing that is. Some days I look back and I'm surprised how many of my friends can't say the same. And I just like I said, I just count myself fortunate.
Nice, man. What'd your mom and dad do growing up when you were growing up?
Well, my father was in the Air Force, so I was an Air Force brat, and my mother, she worked jobs here and there, but towards the when I was in high school, I think she started to pick into. She did some work at the Coast Guard base as like a civilian contractor. Um, but yeah, so basic lifestyle. I always was around military bases from an early young age, so that's kind of been a focal point of my upbringing when I was younger.
And what about mom?
What about her? I mean, she's amazing. I mean, I grew up in an interracial relationship, for parents, so it's like, my father, I'm very particular with this, so I'm going to word this probably weird for most people. So I just give you an advanced, uh, my father is what most people would describe as black. My mother is what most people would describe as white. However, to be more specific, my mother is white and Native American, but she looks white and Italian or something like that. But I've never really. I always kind of like say what you would, I always say it as if this is what they look like and this is what their appearance is, because I'm not a proponent of race, me personally. But each his own.
Okay. Was that a challenge growing up?
It can be, for sure. You don't quite fit in on one side or the other side, because, when your kids are polarized, there's whites, there's blacks, there's, Hispanics, the polarization it starts to like take root around fifth, sixth grade. So it becomes quickly evident when you don't quite fall into those simple little boxes that the society has carved out for each one and every one of us. But I embraced it. I look at it as an advantage instead of a disadvantage.
I can half relate with you, being the son of gay parents. I had two dads growing up, and in school,
Yeah.
I knew it hurt one of my parents because that's my dad and that's my uncle. It was the only way to survive as a kid in school. Like you said, just the polarization. But I'm happy, like you, for the challenge and the adversity that we kind of took on. I think it made me a lot stronger. It made me a more tolerant person. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, it's those kind of challenges that we face early on that kind of give us a lot of our identity going forward and help to shape us. It doesn't make us, but it makes us. It gives us the ability to adapt in a different way than others would.
So let's talk about school growing up, since we're kind of on the subject. Did you go to the same school or did you move schools a lot?
Military brat. So yeah, I didn't quite settle down until I was probably in the sixth grade, fifth,
Mm.
sixth grade. So around that time, that's when I really started to settle in North Carolina area. And I finished out the rest of my, you know, education at that time in that state.
How was school for you? Were you easy to get along with other kids? Were you kind of keep to yourselfy?
Well, it's interesting because when I was really young, I was bad. I'm just gonna call it like I see it. I was
Bad
not a
kid?
great. Yeah, I was a bad kid, and what I mean by bad is I was more of like a I was borderline a bully. I wasn't nice, and it wasn't until I had a moment probably in sixth grade. I think it was sixth grade. I want to say fifth, but I believe it's sixth because a good friend of mine, I watched his brother had committed suicide, and it was because his brother was being bullied, not by me, but it was because his brother was being bullied, and that was the change. Like I knew immediately that bullying and taking advantage of kids was now no longer something I needed to partake in. And I was probably doing that. I wouldn't say I was like a serial bullier, but I definitely wasn't a nice kid in fifth grade, fourth grade, third grade. I was mean and I wasn't a great person. Uh, I don't believe people are great, period. But like I definitely wasn't checking off anyone's boxes, that's for sure. And I had to have that moment in the line in that sand early and when I was young that really kind of changed and made me be more aware of the things that I was doing.
Where did it come from, the bullying?
I don't know. I think I just grew up. I felt like it was tough to always, exert myself and to always be in charge and dominant. And I think that it was a natural thing for me. I wanted things my way all the time, and that was just how it was. And yeah, it didn't turn out well. But I'm glad that it was something I weeded out early. And so most people, who met me after sixth grade would never describe me as such. But I know that, that's the thing about when you move from city to city, when you reinvent yourself, your past doesn't follow you as much. So people didn't really associate the past with me. So I had a good opportunity to have a clean slate, and I knew that I needed to take it. I needed not to turn back. So, and ever since then, the way I've dealt with people has been totally different. It was really life altering and changing. So, you never know how those kind of key moments in your life will just absolutely take you to another direction.
Been a big theme at the Fat and Spicy Studios recently, bullying and getting up, the horrors of being in an online community like we are is that toxicity can flow no matter who you are.
And see, that's the thing. Like, that's one of the reasons why I'm transparent about it. I don't feel any shame to say, when I was younger, I made mistakes because everyone makes mistakes in some capacity, shape, or form. But it's the ability to say, you know what, I'm not perfect. I messed up here. And to really be self-aware, because it's when you start thinking that, well, I'm perfect. I was the best kid ever and everyone loved me. That's kind of like writing your story in a different kind of way. And I don't see any value in that. I see value in absolutely owning your mistakes and turning from them.
I love it. So once you kind of straightened up your bullying ways, did that affect your schoolwork, or were you always a good student, bad student?
I was actually a pretty good student. I mean, I think I got things quickly, so I was always thrust into advanced courses, things like that. But I really never really worked hard to get to my potential. That was the thing that I'm sure a lot of kids hear that, because there are some kids who just have that ability to tap into like a maturity level really young, and then they can just kind of actually reach some of their potential and perform really well because they want to. I just found myself to be more of just going with the flow, right? Just enough to keep going, yeah, but not enough to actually stand out or do anything spectacular.
The only reason I was ever a good student because I found out that if you at least got a B, the teachers would get off your back. So I figured I'd just maintain a B average my whole life. What
Well,
do they say?
makes sense.
Never give 100% because that's what they'll ask of you all the time.
Yeah, it's a good strategy.
So grade school, everything went okay. Everything was going all right. How was high school for you?
Yeah, grade school everything was good. High school was good. I ended up being it's kind of crazy how fast I reinvented myself because by the time I was at high school, I I was a whole different person, you know. I was actually more popular than I thought for some reason. I think it had a lot to do as I was on the TV. So like, you know how in the morning, I don't know if this was true for all schools, but when I was going through high school, I was actually the person who gave your morning announcements. So yeah, I got thrown into that program because I remember a teacher was like, "Hey, we're not getting anyone to watch these morning announcements. Uh, do you mind trying it?" And I was like, "Well, if I try it, I'm going to do it my way." And he was like, "What does that mean?" I was like, "Well, I got to be a little more, have some more antics. It's got to be cool. It's got to be fun. People will have to watch it." So I think the very first thing I did is like, my high school had like a panther as its what is it motto?
Mascot.
Mascot. There you go. Panther as his mascot, black one, and I put on our Panther mascot outfit, and I just remember jumping across screens. It was just goofy stuff that kids do, you know. And then sometimes I would be sitting. We had a co-host, and I would be sitting on a phone while he was giving the news, and I'd be pretending like I was talking to like a lady, you know, like a girl. I'm like, you know, like this, and then when he was done talking, then I would be like, oh, hold on one sec, and then we would give the news, and it was just these little ad libs that weren't real, but they were just more catchy and more interesting. And instead of just say, oh, here's the word of the day, kids, and here's what the weather's going to be, and this is what's going to be for lunch, it's like between those little digs, how can we be a little more entertaining? And so that kind of really, I became like a figure in high school because of that, because it was just, you saw me every day, you know.
Mhm. Right on. A lot of kids don't get that exposure and kind of have to fight their way. It's kind of nice to be part of a project that almost, even if it's not, I don't want to say celebrity, but the notoriety of, like
Yeah.
you said, seeing your face every day. There's not much negativity you can give to the guy who's giving you the announcements.
Yeah, and it's those kind of things that it made me realize. I was like, actually, I didn't know how many people knew me. I just was enjoying doing it, but it was I was surprised every day as people would see me down the hall. Hey, Josh, and I participated in sports and other things that kind of gave me a presence in high school. But man, everyone just knew me. Like people I couldn't tell you their names. They would just be like coming up to me, talking to me, and I'm like, oh, and then I realized they felt very familiar with me, but I didn't know who they were because I was on TV. But that's the kind of thing that we do with like people on television, really. And it's just low level. I'm not trying to act like I'm some celebrity, but I got to understand what that's like to have people you don't know approach you, but you're like, oh, okay, and just go with it.
I love that, man. That's awesome. You played sports?
Yeah. I ran track, played basketball. Those were my sports. I did a little football, but it wasn't something I enjoyed. It's too team sporty. I was more of I like the individual sports. I still had something in me that I just didn't like being beholden to the performance level of others. I found myself always pushing too hard and wanting more from them. And so I found my favorite sport was track because it was individual. Rose and, sink or swim on your own, so to speak. And I enjoyed that because I did, and it also kept me from lashing out at anyone, like there's nothing worse than being on a basketball court and, everyone's like, there's a couple of seconds left, wrong play gets drawn up, and then you're just angry at the way the coach did it, you're angry at the way the forward did it, and it's just like, oh man, maybe the individual sports are more my forte.
You never let her? Did you follow it all the way through varsity, or did you just kind of do it?
No, I actually did really well. I went to states in track early. However, for high jump and 400, I was a 400 runner, and I could do 800, but I was more of a 400 runner. That was like my prime. So 400 and high jump went to states. However, for my senior year, I just completely dropped out. I never even did any more sports. And I had a lot of promise. Everyone was looking forward to me doing sports, but I was working at the Coast Guard base at the time. I started doing this groundbreaking internship thing that my city had started, and that was the first ever to be a part of it back in, I think it was like 2 years before I graduated. And so then by that time I was actually doing really well, and it was paying really well. It was actually really crazy.
Is it like an apprentice program for the Coast Guard?
It was a TI work program that actually gave you a credit for high school. So I was leaving high school in the afternoon when most people were, still there. I would leave after lunch and I would go work. But truthfully, I would just go sign in, make a lot of money. I was making a lot of money doing this. Because it was its first program ever. They didn't really have the checks and balances they have in those programs today. So I was making obscene amounts of money doing this. Yeah, it was just ridiculous, and nobody knew. Yeah, and exactly. Nobody understood. There was no one checking anything. It was just like, oh, you're making money, and I'm like, So it's kind of hard. So then I kind of found myself getting into that mode of, I'm not going to any practices. I'm going to the mall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. LeBron syndrome. No, I guess not. He practices every day. That's not fair. That's not fair.
Yeah.
So you brought up the Coast Guard. Was that a dream of yours
No,
to
no
get into the
dream.
Coast
Just
Guard, or was it?
the program was just an opportunity to kind of get my foot in the door of like, well, I guess what I'm doing now, which is more of like working alongside the federal government in some capacity.
Okay,
And I enjoyed it. It was cool.
you're
It
just
was
a
enjoyable.
contractor. Right on.
Exactly.
So you're out of high school now after making buku bucks after school doing Coast
Yeah.
Guard stuff. What do you do now?
So, I've told many people this, and I'm surprised. I think, our conversation off screen, which is, the intrigue about what it is I do. Well, I mean, I work in the cybersecurity industry, okay? And I've been in the cybersecurity industry for just over a decade, and I have provided consulting services, and that's a very broad term because a consultant, there's ranges. That term in the industry is very broad. You can hear, for example, you can get out of high college and become a consultant for an organization, make 80 grand, or you can be a consultant for an organization and make 600 grand. So the consultant term is a very broad term. It really just depends on what you're consulting for and who you're consulting. So there are levels to that game, but like in cybersecurity, that's a field that I've been in for a while. So I've kind of stuck around in that as long as I can. That's kind of been my bread and butter.
Is that what you went to college for?
Actually, yes, but I dropped out of college. So the irony is that I went to college for a year before dropping out. I was in computer science and I was studying, cybersecurity. However, I dropped out, and all of my friends who stayed in and continued and got their degrees, they're not actually working in the industry. But me, I actually am. It gets weird how life it plays out that way. You would net like, to this day, I don't know how it happened. I can recount the steps, and it still surprises me.
Dropped out of college, and look at you now. So you dropped out of college. Was it for a job, or did you just not feel the worth of
Yeah.
the education?
Well, two, I was wasting my time. I was spending more time. I was wasting my time and the education's time. Like I realized that I wasn't as interested in school as I thought I was. Well, at that time in my life, I realized I just wanted to start life. I didn't want to be back in behind a desk and theoretically go through life. I think unfortunately, in today's society and in the society that I grew up, the time that I grew up, there was a notion which is go to college, you get a good job, and no one ever really said what it's going to take when you get out of college. It was just kind of like, oh, do these prerequisites and someone's going to give you a job because you got this fancy piece of paper. But I kind of felt in like just inside, I was like, man, I just want to do life. Okay. Anything is better than sitting behind this desk listening to someone talk about things that they really can't say that they know about because they're teaching me. And I don't want their role. I want the role of this person or that person. And they're not here to tell me how to get there. And you kind of learn really quickly in life that the only real impediments to the things that you want are your desire to go after them. So I just decided I'm dropping out. I yeeted it, and I ended up joining the Navy. I just said I'm going to join the Navy. I'm going to see the world while I'm young, and I'm going to get exposed to a lot of stuff really fast, and then I'll know what I want to do in 4 years for sure.
And did you see the world?
Oh yeah, I definitely saw the world. I'll say this. I don't know how, but it just was just a lot of people when they join the Navy or you join the Air Force or the military, you're going to go somewhere, but you're not going to be out there continually. Well, I was on a special thing called a forward deployment, which is basically like continuous. So my first 2, 3 years, I was continually deployed overseas. Yeah, so there was no break.
Oh,
And that's a very, very rare thing. And I didn't even understand it myself until I got out of A school and I joined, and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You're going to Guam." And I'm like, "Okay, where is that?" And they're like, "It's an island," and I'm like, "Oh my!"
there you go.
And yeah,
Was was that extended or that continuous deployment based on what you went to college for, without having to give too much away? Were they using your skills out there, your IT skills?
No. That continuous deployment was it was just because that's how the Navy is sometimes. The Navy has a way of like, chewing you up and spitting you out, and sometimes you'll go to a school, you'll learn a trade, and they're like, man, we don't care about that. You're going here, you're doing this. Yeah, you're the property of the United States government. You have say-so to a degree, but not really. Your rights are not the same as like a normal civilian at that point, and that's something that you adjust to. Every person in the military understands. You adjust to. You belong to the government, and you go where they tell you. And I just had to suck it up and endure. But it taught me a lot. It got me. It showed me a lot about the world. I got to go to Australia, Guam, Palau, Saipan. Japan. I got to go to the world. I got to see what was out there, and not just for like a day or two, for weeks, months at a time. I would be in like Japan. Try to picture, 19, 20, 20 to 21 early, and then, walking around Japan for 2 months, like by yourself, and, just kind of just like, getting lost and jumping on trains, and people come up and tell you, hey, let's go this way. And then you go to another place like Australia, and it's absolutely amazing, just things like that. Those are priceless gems that I'll never be able to like, that are just always in my mind.
What was your favorite port?
That's a long story, and I don't know how crazy I can get on this interview.
You can get as crazy as you want, man. I want you to get crazy. I love this stuff.
Okay. So I would say there's two. I really, really enjoy Singapore. It's a beautiful place. If you never had a chance to go, I encourage everyone to go. The level of cleanliness that they have just will blow you away if you're an American. Like you would never think of going onto like a trolley and, those things people hold on to while they're sitting in. You could lick that in Singapore because that's how clean it is. They're constantly cleaning everything. See, I learned very young that they don't really have any natural resources to export. So their only export is tourism. That's where they get a lot of their money, is tourism. So this is why they have those famous shirts where they're like, people get arrested for spitting chewing gum on the sidewalk. These are arrestable offenses. So you don't find this anywhere. That's and also you could, yeah, it's a real deal. They're strict about littering and anything like that when it comes to trash. Because if you do that, you could go to jail. So you need to pay attention. And you wouldn't be the first, and you won't be the last. But the thing about that discipline is it makes the environment pristine and beautiful. Here's another quality thing that most people can't say. I could take a stack of $100 and put it on my like if I'm eating, at a restaurant, I could just put it on the table, walk across the street, go look at something, some clothes or the store, come back into the restaurant, and my money would still be there.
No kidding.
Absolutely.
Is it both a combination of fear of retribution and they want to keep you coming back to spend money for tourism, or are they pretty harsh with their sentencing?
We'll make it simple. You get caught stealing there, you lose a hand, So you don't see many people who are like, I got a lot of hands to spare.
Modern day too?
I don't know how serious they are today in 2024, but that's a different country. People have to understand that's how it's been. It's not changing. And that discipline makes society run optimal. Like you're going to think you're in like the most luxurious city ever. It is gorgeous to be in. Just imagine like being in like Manhattan and walking down Times Square, because that's how updated it is. Like we're talking super technology, everything.
Full modern city.
Yeah, it's a full modern city. It's like being in like Manhattan. It's just like being in Times Square. That's what it looks like. But imagine if Times Square was ridiculously clean. That's Singapore. And so that city was fantastic. And then Australia. I enjoyed Australia. The parties in Australia were absolutely amazing.
The parties, is that it?
Parties. Can't say anymore. Gold Coast. If you know, you know.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know. I'm not a big traveler. I've traveled maybe through the West Coast and down to Hawaii. That's about it.
I had this party. I just want to this just got me thinking of. I did this party in Australia. We pulled in the night before New Year's. I forget what New Year's this was, but it was the night before New Year's, and that was the best party I have ever been to. It was an entire city party. Like you'd walk outside and they had like these squares on the floor that were lighting up. They were just makeshift dance floors. They put them in grass and people were everywhere. There was over here, it was like reggae. Over here, it was hard rock. Over here, it was hip hop. Over here, it would be a little country. You just were like, wow, this place is so, it's just multicultural in a lot of ways. It just was fantastic.
Sounds like the Navy's a big party, dude.
These are the highlights, right? You don't really get to talk too much about 95% of your time.
Yeah, no kidding. What were the lowlights? What's the hardest part of the Navy?
Lowlights is being on a ship, looking out into the ocean and just seeing nothing. Sometimes that can be a highlight. It's pretty out there. I was also involved in things like, there was a mudslide in the Philippines one year. And, our ship was called to go there. And, we carried I don't want to get too graphic, but we had carried body bags, and this is, so when the world needed help, our ship was closest. We showed up and we offered help. So sometimes that means getting down in the ground and picking up people. And, that's the harsh reality of it. You're a first responder in a lot of ways. And it's those kind of things are tragic and sad. It really makes you reflect on life when you're faced with the reality of like this person's child is not going to go home, because an entire school got covered during this event. So articles, I think it would be like so that'd be about 2006. You probably could Google it and find it if anyone wants to look it up. It was a mudslide in the Philippines on one of the islands. And it actually looks like from a distance, because the island looks small in the photo, but it's big. But it looks like someone took their hand and just wiped off the top of the mountain, just scraped it down, like just some big monstrous hand. But reality is just a mudslide. And it covered half the town, and a lot of people perished.
So how do you deal with having to close your eyes at night after seeing all that? Does that stuff still linger with you? Have you kind of learned to put it behind you?
Yeah, very early on in the military, you have to put on thick skin quickly because you're going to get exposed to this stuff. We have briefs. If you've ever been in the military, and anyone who's been, you may go to a port, and the first thing they do is show you briefs, of people who lose their lives in the most tragic way. And you understand that life is not a promise. It's not nothing guaranteed to you, and you really need to cherish and be thankful for every day that you have. So I kind of adapted early, and I've been very comfortable with my own mortality, and so it's not too hard to rest because I understand, this is just a blessing in and of itself to be able to do like these kind of conversations, and experience life.
Nice, man. So while you're in the military, you married, got a relationship going, or you just kind of flying single and solo at that time?
This is an interesting conversation. Well, yeah, I definitely had relationships, but I try to keep all of that private. My private life on that front, because also at that young age, I wasn't very. Let's just say I was very. I was a young guy. I was out and about. I probably wasn't the best person to be around when it came to that. I was. It's hard to tell a guy who's in the Navy, 21, I shouldn't have been in any relationships that I was in. Let's just say that.
Okay, fair enough. I got you. I get it.
Yeah.
So how long were you in the Navy?
I only did 4 years, but it was the wildest 4 years because, like I said, unlike most people, where they, in a 4-year span, typical person in the Navy would do one tour before they probably get out just before their second. But for me, with my constant forward deployment, I went on multiple tours. In fact, in my 4 years, I did more tours than most people have done in 20. And that's just how it is because of the nature of my command that I was attached to. And actually, that particular ship, the USNS Concord TAFS-5, you can Google it. It's actually at the bottom of the ocean right now. It's been made into a barrier reef. It was one of the oldest ships in the Navy. It was decommissioned and made into a civilian ship, which had a small military segment on board. And I was part of that contingent.
Oh, That's pretty cool. A little piece of history that you got to float around on.
Yep, yep. It's down at the bottom of the ocean right now. So, so I've seen pictures of it as a little barrier reef, and I look back and I think back like, man, I was on that ship. Like, I don't remember it. I don't remember it that way. You know, I still remember being in my rack and in my bunk and going down the hallways, working out in the gym, eating in the galley, all that stuff.
What normally happens to these ships? Is that what happens? They usually use them to create barriers, or does it depend on the ship?
I think there's two things. I think early on, depending on the type of ship, obviously, but once they break them down and get all their components, top secret, secret out, all that stuff, it either will go to a shipyard to get broken down, or they'll tug it, make it a barrier reef like mine, or and they do target practice on it. That's how they do it. Make it a barrier reef. You know, they take it out there and they usually test some new weapon on those ships, the old decommissioned ships, and then that's how they sink them. Or sometimes I think they end up in like just a big stockpile going over to India and getting broken down there.
Turned into razor blades?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the old myth that we've always, they're going to turn that thing into razor blades. That's what my dad used to say.
No, actually, yeah, I never heard that one, but I do know that they have like a lot of breakdown facilities overseas that some of these ships go to. I can't attest to all of the United DoD ships, but I do know that some vessels go that way.
Okay. And before I forget, worst port. Stay away from this port. Don't ever go in there ever again. It haunts me in my dreams.
I won't say worst port because it was a great port, but I will say it's important to pay attention because I didn't really have a worst port, but the one port that I would say people need to be cognizant of is if you go to Japan and you end up in Tokyo and you're having a good time and you're partying because it's one of the party capitals of the world, pay attention, because a lot of the places down there are geared towards and letting you have as best of a time as you can possibly have. And let's just say I somehow racked up a tab, me and my partner, that was vast, and we didn't realize it. I was depending on him to know the conversion of yen to dollars. And yeah, that didn't work out so well. Luckily, we had just enough in our accounts not to get absolutely demolished. But it's those kind of things that I would say it's not about worst port, but it was about, hey, any port could be your worst one if you're not paying attention and you're not on your P's and Q's. There's nothing worse than being at a foreign country and you do something bad because you may not get back on your ship.
Yeah, no kidding. Cause an international incident on accident.
Yeah.
Do they give the sailors any kind of a warning or training for some of the more non-street smart ones? Like, hey,
every time any sailor goes to, if you go to Japan, number one, you're going to get a brief on the Yakuza. You're going to get a brief on areas of town that you can't walk into. You get an actual intelligence brief. Okay. Like same kind of intelligence that people talk about on television and stuff, like in the spy movies. You're going to get that because they want to make sure that don't go to this block, don't go to this block, don't go to this block. They give you a general idea of why you don't go to that block, but they're going to let you know. We call it liberty. Once you're about to go on liberty, they want to make sure you know where not to be. Sometimes they'll even have like standards on what you can or cannot do. From what I understand, the Navy, since it's been years since I've been out, so I think they've even gotten more strict. So I believe that there's a lot of more defined policy on how they go out now too as well.
I worked security for a couple of years at a shipyard here or not here, but in Portland, Oregon. And we were just a little force protection team while they were getting cleaned. They'd come up to Swan Island in Portland. And I'll never forget, we had a bosun who lived on one of our oil tankers. He just took care of the ship. Every night, this guy would come home pissed drunk. To the point that the last time I saw him, he had wet himself as he was walking up the gangway. Never knew what happened to him, but I always wondered about the drinking. Does that come with the territory of being in the Navy? Because I've talked to a lot of sailors in my time, and every one of them seems to talk about drinking.
Yeah, that's the old adage that the Navy has tried to get away from. It's the drunken sailor kind of meme. But when I was in, it was still real thing. We were starting to make that turn and that transition. But it just comes with the lifestyle. You got to think of it, right? You're on a ship every day. You don't see land every day. And this could go on for months. You could be 3 months out to sea, 3 months. You could be months. You could be longer than that. You could be 6 months out to sea. You could be 9 months out to sea. This is real. This is happening every year, by the way.
Without touching land.
You could be. Yes, absolutely. So that if, for example, you could be my ship. The reason why it was a forward deploy was because we were a refueler, so we can refuel you underway. You don't have to pull in to get fuel. You don't have to pull in to get your mail. They call it a vert rep and an unrep. You can get like all that stuff sent over from a ship or from a helo. So you might not. There's no guarantee that you're going to see land, especially in times of war, times of turmoil. There's no guarantee how long it's going to be before you hit port again. So if you kind of think about that now you'll understand. When people are going out there, they have a bank account and a pocket full of money, the money that they haven't been able to spend. And they have been stuck in a ship for maybe a month, maybe two, maybe a couple of weeks at a time. Who knows? Yeah, that's a mix that a lot of money in your pocket, you're young, and you've been stuck in like isolation forever. It's almost like letting prisoners out every weekend, every month.
Yeah.
See, the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
They're going to party like it's no tomorrow. And they're going to hit it so hard. I really couldn't even say anything when you talked about, the guy coming across drunk and stuff, because I've had my nights being carried into the ship, passed out. I know what that's like, and most sailors do.
Crazy thing about this guy, I will say, no matter he'd come back, 3:00 in the morning. We were doing the night watch and whatnot. He would always be up and ready at 7:30 in the morning, dressed, looking sharp, at his desk, doing his job. No matter what time he came in, that guy was always at his desk, working, doing paperwork. I'm sure that guy was hungover as a motherfucker, and he was still.
I can't look. I gave so one time I went to Portland, Oregon, and this is called Fleet Week. It's like
my home
go up there,
Rose Festival.
Yeah, and we pull in and we get absolutely trashed. But the very next morning, I had tours to give. Because people are coming in into usually it's older vets, people who got out of the Navy years ago, or maybe the Air Force, and they're bringing their family to tour one of these vessels, and they're coming on board. And almost all the sailors who are giving these tours are absolutely hungover. But you would, and you don't know it because it's, they're just walking around like zombies. They're like, look at that, And they, I can't tell you how much I lied giving my tour. I was just lying about everything. I was like, And the funny thing, I just remember this really old guy who knew better, who was like a Navy vet. He was looking at me like with the most disgust. I was like, I'm sorry, man, but. I try to make my tours, on those kind of occasions interesting and make people laugh. And so I was able to do that.
Tell me that old guy hasn't been in your position back in the past.
Oh, he absolutely has. Those guys they were even worse. Just so you know, those guys, the generations before me, we were nothing compared to them. Like I'll give you a quick story, and this is something that I heard, and it'll probably shock a lot of people, but we used to have these things called GMTs, General Military Training. They probably still do it now, for all I know. But we had this one old guy on my ship who had been 20 years retired from the Navy and was on his 20th year retiring as a civilian mariner. And he was from MSC PAC, and he came in, and he was an ex-officer, and I never forget this, and this is my whole command, absolutely, like, our eyes, our leadership flipped out because they didn't know he was going to say this. He's like, back in my day, people used to be proud to be in line when they got back out for the first night at port. They would go out, party, and they'd come back to the ship, and they'd all be lined up in the hallway. You'd go down the hallway, because there's only two hallways on the ship, port starboard. He's like, on one of the, the dock hallway, you would see them all lined up, all these guys who just had their first night in town. And they said, well, you know what they were in line for? And we were like, no, we had no idea. He's like, they were in line because they were going to get their penis hammered. I was like, what? I said, what? Exactly. And so apparently, one of the STDs, I think it's the clap. I'm not a professional here, but I think it's the clap, or maybe it's another one. But I think it's these crystals that form at the end of your member, and the way the doctors at that time would deal with it is to hit the tip of it with the hammer and crush it. Yeah, they would crush the crystals inside. And here's the thing. That's not the shocking part. It was the fact that when you would walk down this hallway, he said, when people would come on board, they would high-five each other on the way down the hallway. See, now you're getting to the mentality of these guys. They were proud to be going to the brothels in the city. Yeah, they were proud that they were getting these STDs, right? Like, that is almost
Badge of honor.
unbelievable culture-wise. It was a badge of honor. That's
Yeah.
how they looked at it in the 60s and 70s. It was a badge of honor to be a sailor who just went out in town all night and found
Partied your
himself in
nuts
some
off.
probably, yeah, and now is coming back and has to go check in with Doc because he thinks he has to clap. That was a badge to them. So when they talk about, or they look down at me for having a drink and a few parties, man, I know how your generation was.
Yeah. Did you ever have the crystal? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, no.
I'm joking.
Yeah, no.
So you do all of this time in the military, not all this time, but 4 years. You're out there constantly. You finally get done. You step off the ship. What are your hopes and dreams?
Hopes and dreams.
Like, what did you want to do
I guess-
coming out of the military?
Well, I knew, at the time, I knew I had my clearance. So, that's one of the easiest ways to get a clearance in the United States is, join the military. And, they pay hundreds of $1,000s to investigate you, call your friends up, investigate random stuff that you did back in high school and, pass to everyone who ever knew you. But once I got my clearance, I knew that was going to be probably the biggest bargaining chip in my career going forward because, I didn't have that degree. I never completed college. So I said, well, I could just continue to pursue cybersecurity with a clearance. Those two, skill sets working in tandem, they go really well together. And as long as you start racking up experience, it can be very profitable and very, valuable to do that.
Okay. So you find yourself a job, you're working, and how's life at this point? Out of the military, do you miss it? You kind of just
Oh,
day-to-day
yeah,
rhythm?
I didn't miss it, that's for sure. Because, there's a certain level of freedom that comes with being out of the military. The reason why that person, most people show up hungover is because they have to. It's not like you have a choice. You can go to jail by, not showing up for muster in the morning. So these things, you're not, like I said, your rights are gone when you're in the military. And that's why it's a sacrifice, right? You said you want to serve your country. You pledged an oath, and so that's what you got to do. So you got to honor that, and anyone who pledges an oath, you got to honor it. But at the end of the day, yeah, I was happy to be back on my own time, and I wasn't looking forward to going under the thumb of anyone anymore.
Excellent. So what are we doing now? You're out on your own.
Yep.
You kind of giving it up. You're working now. Any hobbies? Anything to speak of?
Cybersecurity work. I picked that up since our days at AAC. It's always something I can continue to do and provide consulting services in. And there's a lot of companies always looking for cyber talent, and so that's something I've renewed. But it's just good to be back doing those kind of things that I used to be in before. So yeah.
Excellent. You and I don't want to get too heavy into that. That's not what really the show is about, but I think it's a part of your and I's relationship that we should talk about. Was we met playing a role-playing game. And
Yep.
I always wondered, because I talked to a lot of people in that game, and I think I'm not your average bear when it comes to the average user of the game. I don't think you are either. I really like to listen. That's why I do the show, so I can shut the fuck up and hear what you guys have to tell me for a change. It's my curious nature too. I just like to know about people. I'm a dork, but I always noticed that you had a rare intelligence about you, and I never understood what drew you. Somebody like you, creative, well-spoken. I've always noticed that about you. You always had a way to talk that was unique to yourself from anybody else in those servers that we played games on. What drew you to that?
Well, I don't know what I can say about the event 2020, big worldwide event. But that really, yeah, whatever that is, I don't know how to word that on this kind of platform, but that event that everyone knows we're talking about, that really changed society. And, I just, much like everyone else, was reactionary. I had to think like, well, what am I going to do with all this time sitting in my house, Because right before that, I was doing a lot of briefs. My role and my job was to do a lot of briefs, intelligence briefs and things of that sort, cybersecurity related stuff. And, nobody was meeting anymore, and they were meeting online. And I was like, well, I'm going to take some time to myself and figure out what I want to do going forward. I wasn't in a position where I felt pressed that I needed to maintain some kind of thing career-wise. So I enjoyed exploring things and trying to, be a part of something. So when I would get exposed to FiveM, I just remember thinking, wow, this is a great platform because there's so much potential. You can the things that you could do, and if you were creative and you were if you were thoughtful about it, you could really enjoy, an entire medium to like broadcast a story. That's what I saw out of it. I was like, wow, why couldn't you just make like everyone's, it's literally in the beginning. You're making a character, right? And people skip past that part. They're just like, well, I'm gonna put some eyebrows on, gotta get some hair, I gotta get a face. But every time I got into that very beginning, when I was just a member of a community, I was always like, wow, what is this person? Who is this person gonna be? Like that was the fun, was the imagination behind what kind of person am I making? What is he going to do? And I always wanted to have someone with him some intrigue. I didn't want to just have someone who was just kind of boring. I wanted someone to have some depth. So I started that thinking, let's have a character, a real character, like a storybook character. And that's how I RP'd, was to, think of storyline, even when I was, like I said, just a member of a community.
Interesting. I always wondered how you found it. How you found AAC? Not AAC? How you found FiveM and the RP? Like, did you? Just
I can talk to that. So I had some streamer friends, really good friends of mine, even to this day. We don't talk as much as we used to, but they're absolutely wonderful people. Some of you would know Green Bay Kill. His name is Noah, and Andre, Player Two Gaming. These individuals, we kind of got. We started, and there were others. I don't want to leave anyone out, so I apologize. I'm just trying to give a high-level overview for those that are listening. There are plenty more. But those were some of the key people that we were doing. We were doing like a little stories. I found myself as a member of their community wanting to help them create their stories. And then their community started reaching out and saying, we want more of you. You should do more stuff. And at first you think people are just saying that kind of thing, but then people start asking and requesting, and you realize people really like what I'm doing. Like, so I started to try to figure a way to be more present in streams and be more present in activities that were happening on their channels. And through that process, that's when I got exposed to this stuff. I remember, never forget the day they were like, you need to come back, you need to do this. And I said, okay. And then that launched my entire saga at one of the communities where I became a business owner and started to do things there.
Essentially ended up running things to almost a degree.
A little bit.
That was a fun time for all of us. That's how I met you, was through that whole fiasco. Now, you becoming the mayor. We wouldn't have met if you weren't doing all of that, because that was the only reason for you to be in City Hall, I think.
Yeah, the first time that I did that, so my first character was a guy named John. That was before I met you. And then that character, when I killed him off, because I believed every character should have a beginning, middle, and an end, and that it should kind of crescendo in there. Their life should be interesting. And when I killed him off, the entire community, I couldn't believe how devastated people were. Like, it was like they thought like I was gone. Like, it kind of took me by surprise. And I felt guilty in a lot of ways. I had people sending me messages like, what are you doing? This was the worst thing ever. I cried all day. I'm not kidding you. I was watching a streamer, actually the community that I was in, the administrator for that community. While I went to his stream, while he was streaming the community, he saw me in the chat and said, John, look what you did to this community. He just spied on people, like as an admin, and they were talking about me, and they were crying. And I was like, what? And that's when I realized I had a bigger impact that I didn't understand. And I thought, man, I was just building a character. So I said to myself, I said, okay, I got to bring another character back, because it started to make sense. I was like, what happens is in these communities is even if you start off RPing, the social aspect is real. Like, you and I, we role played together, right? But in a way, it feels like we know each other. Mm-hmm. And that's because that social aspect is real. And so what I realized when I killed my character off was, in a way, I kind of abandoned my friends. Like, I didn't think of it that way when I was doing it. I thought I was just fulfilling my script. But I abandoned my friends because I was no longer RPing in the community. And they were actually devastated. And I said, okay, I'm going to bring a character back. But me, obviously I'm not going to bring the same guy back, because I had an epic kind of exit for him, video and all. I'll have to post some of that stuff. But I had a little video, because I still have all that. But I decided to bring this new character. because every character had a theme. John's theme was he was a secret alien who ran a club called the Galaxy, you know, and then he got abducted by aliens and sucked into a black hole and off into oblivion, and no one ever saw him again. And that's how he died. But then I decided to bring in this new character called Fretter, and he was the reincarnated soul of John, who somehow got thrown into an android in the deep darkest space, which is also on video, part of a video that I created, and he's coming back. So that way people could still have a little taste of John, because he would do some things. In fact, the first day I ever showed up, and everyone knew who I was. They were just so excited. They were like, you should come to the Galaxy, because they wanted me to go to the old club I used to own. But every time I would walk over there, I would faint. So it caused intrigue. People were like, wait, he can't go into the Galaxy, you know? But they couldn't break character and be like, you know, address me as John. So they were like, why can't this Fretter guy go to the Galaxy? And why can't he talk about, you know? And then, you know, it was just weird stuff like that I like to keep going.
I have a question that's been on my mind since I've known you. Whenever we RP together, like when you actually have time to sit and play with me, you never stand still. If we're having a meeting one-on-one in your office, you pace like nobody's business. What is that a character trait, or is that just the way your fingers fidget with the keyboard?
That was a thing I kept up. So I noticed I was doing that as John, and I noticed people noticed it. So when I became Fretter, I had these little tells that I was still John
Little
in some
sprinkles of
weird
John
way.
left in.
Little sprinkles of John, you know, the fainting going into the Galaxy. Anytime anyone tried to bring me there, I put a picture up of John in my house. So I had a mural of John in my house that you could see in my office. It's very ominous looking. And I had just little characteristics and mannerisms that I held over from John's character, but almost like a subconscious thing, not something overt like I'm putting it out there, but just for some reason, I don't know why I like pancakes, you know, that kind of thing, you know.
You know, it's funny that you talk about when you killed John off. Sorry, I don't know what words you can use anymore in this world.
Yeah.
But when John left, everybody was talking about you. You didn't realize how famous you were. It almost takes me back to your experiences in high school as the morning announcements guy, just not realizing what an impact you can
I didn't think about that. Yeah. But, you know, that's an interesting correlation, man. I didn't even think about that. But I will say it was I had a lot of staff that helped me run and operate the Galaxy when I was John. And to watch them on stream being spectated by an admin, not knowing it, but crying. And he was just watching them. They were doing this for show. They were crying in a club on the floor. And then he went to another. I have this recorded, by the way. He went to another part of the city, found some other people, and they were talking about me and sad. And then he went to another part of the city. People were getting dressed. They were talking about me and sad. And I was like, what? It blew my mind that it's not about being flattered by it, but it was like, wow, I think I told a good story. I was impressed with the story. I was like, and I was very proud of the videos at that time, that it had resonated with people and that my presence in the city had resonated with people. And so then I said, well, it's kind of weird because the story's over. I'm satisfied because the story's over, but I've abandoned my friends. How do I rekindle that? So I brought Fretter back in to be, I thought, more laid back and just a part of the community. But in good old-fashioned me, I just can't seem to not
Can't do it.
put my hand in the kicking jar.
You can't do it. Well, I'll tell you what, man. The most fun that I've had RPing has been with you and Jacob. You guys are
Nice,
my RP champions, and it's always nice to know that sometimes a relationship, friendship can carry on after the game is over.
Actually, can you cut that out? The Jacob part, just say me. I'm just kidding. I don't like that guy. I'm just kidding. Who is that guy? Who's Jacob?
Oh, definitely. We're talking about that on the Fat and Spicy show. You guys have been great, and like I said, to carry on a friendship after the game is over, and we all move on with whatever it was we want to do has always been special. You've always fascinated me to a degree. You've always been an RPer that I've looked up to. I saw what you did and how hard you ran with it. I didn't know that was possible. When we met, I was a lawyer, and that's what I did. I went around, I saw clients. Every once in a while, I went to court, not very often, and in that city, we just didn't have it set up. But I did a lot of paperwork and shit. And I thought that was my life. I was making money. I bought a nice car. I'd go out and eat good food, and I didn't really socialize too much until I met you guys. I came
Yeah,
across
it's
you,
because
everybody else.
you have a really good, you're very mature and people respond to you well. They appreciate that maturity because sometimes you know how hard it is to walk around a community, sometimes full of kids, and it can be difficult. And so I think people like of our age, we kind of notice each other behind the screen, and we kind of like, oh, this guy's someone I can chat with and have fun with and maybe even have a storyline. Like, wow, that for once in RP, I think that's what brought us all together is that like-minded vision, and you were a big part of the storylines that I was a part of. So, I mean, I enjoyed every aspect just like you did, like it was all fun for all of us. It was a mutual enjoyment.
Any chance of pulling you back in by a thread? Or is
your life no, over? Absolutely not.
That
Look,
chapter's closed.
The first one, it was different because when they were crying and they wanted me back, I had a lot of RP friends and I wanted to come back. This one, it was not that I don't have friends, it's that it became work. I kind of took the poison pill where I mixed business and pleasure, so to speak. And originally it was all pleasure, it was all passion, it was all storyline, it was all videos. And then it became work. And that was the nail in the coffin, so to speak. It kind of turned me off to it forever.
Don't turn your hobby into your job. That's what they say, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely.
Well, listen, as we get down to it, I want to thank you very much for being here. I like getting to know my friends on a one-on-one basis and sharing that with my audience. I think they appreciate it. There's a lot of people who I'm sure are curious about the man behind the absolute, if I may. So this has been a great time. Do you have anything you want to share with the audience before we go? Any life-altering words of wisdom that could come from your brain, man?
Nothing. Look, I definitely just to anyone who, because I've had a lot of people who've reached out to me, and I feel like this might be a good chance just to let everyone know who is interested. I really am grateful for all of the memories that I had being a part of the various communities that I've been a part of throughout my RP and career, I guess is what you want to call it. But those experiences are mutual. All of you guys, I think about you all the time too. And I appreciate all the kind words that people have given me. But as far as like life lessons, I can tell you one thing. I've made a ton of mistakes and I'm definitely an imperfect person. But I'm a believer, I'm a Jesus Christ person. And I would just like to put that out there for anyone to like look that up. Could help you in your life, especially when you're feeling down or you're lowest. But for me, it's just been a blessing. When I look back at everything that I got to experience with all of my friends, each of you, if you're listening, you're part of that community. I'm talking about you because I can't tell you how many people I think about sometimes while I'm at work or doing things that I'm doing, just traveling around. I think about a lot of memories because we all do, and it stands out to me. And I'll never forget those moments. And I just want to thank each of you for that. It's really been a special thing for me.
I want to thank you, dude, for giving us a place to play at AAC. Garnered even more friendships. If it wasn't for AAC, the Fat and Spicy Show wouldn't be around. We wouldn't be having this conversation on Behind the Pint. It wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people to thank, and just for the Fat and Spicy career trajectory, and you're probably one of the pioneers. So thank you again. And guys,
and last but not least, I'm gonna be opening up all of the videos of AAC on the AAC channel because they're there. They're just hidden because usually they were tied to quests. I'm gonna logically order them. I'll do that today, and then release them to the public so people can watch videos. Maybe if you didn't complete a quest and you just want to see how that progressed, I'll have it set up so you can go through the different playlists and see how things were ordered and how it went. Because there was so much talent, like Jacob and myself and you and everyone else put into it. And since it's all still there, it's all media, and it's all for me to just set up, I'll just let people be able to enjoy it as it is.
Good. I want to know how the Eternity quest ended. Yeah. I never got to finish that, but I had a lot of fun doing it.
Sure.
Thank you for.
You'll find out today.
Thank you for being on the show. This means a lot to me. And guys,
thank you for having me.
Is there a place where we can find your social media? Like, where can we find these videos at? Plug your YouTube.
I think it's still all about character. I haven't really touched it much. I'm going to go into it today. I'm going to like I said, get those videos up for the public so they can enjoy them since they're just there. And but yeah, I don't really do any more social media, so you don't have to follow me anywhere. There's nothing really to do there. I don't do Instagram. I don't do any of that stuff. But if you do want to check me out, I do have a web. Well, yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I do have stuff that I'm doing, but I can't really talk too much about it. But
That's fine, man.
yeah,
Anyway, once again, thank you for being on the show, dude. I love you a lot. Guys, thank you for joining us for an episode of Behind the Pint. This has been Josh, a good friend of mine, also known as Absolute, and he's absolutely amazing. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, follow, do all the funky social media things. Click all the buttons that you have to click. It means a lot to the show, helps the algorithm, and hell, even go in there and make a comment, guys. Every little bit helps the Fat and Spicy Show continue to bring amazing interviews and episodes like this. So as always, I like to end by saying, bar is closed.